In this video, we're gonna discuss whether you should use a monopod, tripod, or go handheld when shooting sports. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. What is up? Welcome back. Pete here. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Pete Gottschalk, content producer at Major League Baseball. It's been a really long time since I've made a video. I was moving, went to Tokyo, went a bunch of different other places for some college content for Major League Baseball. So it's been a busy bit. So I'm really sorry for the delay on uploads. We're gonna try and get back into it today. And I'm in my new apartment and we're still working on this setup for videos. So I might switch it up for the next video. We're gonna see how it looks. But for now, we're gonna rock with this on my couch here in the living room. Got some great natural light. In today's video, like I already mentioned, I'm gonna be going over whether you should use a monopod, a tripod, or go handheld, or do some other method of holding your camera when shooting sports. I'm gonna take a couple of my experiences from past sports that I've shot in college and also in Major League Baseball and maybe some freelance, and kind of apply that knowledge to this video and what I think works best. Of course, like I do with a lot of my videos, I'm gonna preface this by saying there's no right answer. If you wanna use a tripod for everything, it accomplishes similar stuff to what a monopod does, but we can get into kind of the nuances there in a little bit, but it's really up to you guys of what you wanna use. If you feel comfortable shooting handheld and not using a monopod, it's up to you. These are just some tips and tricks that I have gathered over the years, shooting soccer at DC United and Major League Soccer, shooting all sports at Georgia when I was in college, and also, of course, my last 6 seasons now, damn, I'm old, with Major League Baseball. So let's get into it. We're gonna start off by just kind of giving a brief description of a monopod, tripod, and then handheld, and the differences between the three. A monopod is what I use. I've used the same monopod for every single game. I've talked about this before. It's a Siriu monopod. I've used it for 300 games or however, maybe more at Major League Baseball now for 6 years. Monopods are pretty self-explanatory. It's just gonna be a single stabilizing kind of thing for your camera. Most photographers use them as well on bigger lenses, and same goes for most videographers. A monopod is going to give you kind of just a generally stable image with a lot more freedom than a tripod. It's gonna be easier to move and pick up. It's gonna be easier to kind of go up and down, I think, if you have a monopod with feet. It's just a little bit more freely moving per se. And now that comes with, of course, negative sides as well. Monopods are just not gonna be as smooth of a pan than a tripod, and it's not gonna be as steady. So the longer lens you're on, if you're on a 600 or even more, monopods become really hard to use. I would say maybe even a 400 or more. Monopods become pretty tough to use when you're panning and doing a lot of movement, or if you want like a truly static shot, monopods are pretty tough. A tripod is pretty self-explanatory too. A tripod is gonna be, the nicer ones at least, are gonna be pretty large in footprint. A lot of places, especially baseball stadiums, don't allow them in the photo wells because they are so large. But tripods are gonna offer you a lot more steady image. You can obviously set your camera up and leave it there. It's gonna stay still rather than a monopod where you kind of have to hold it. Tripods in my eyes are harder to move up and down at times than a monopod. They're just gonna be a lot less free flowing. So for sports where you have to kind of track a basketball or track a football going up and down, I think tripods are very hard when there's 4 different ways of movement, and that's why I don't really use one. But they're amazing for certain things. When I'm in center field at Truist Park in Atlanta, whenever I want to get good pitch mixes and good pitch angles on a really long lens, I will use a tripod. And then finally, handheld. I still handheld my camera all the time. This is more when I'm on a wide lens, or if I'm on like a prime lens, like a 50 or something, I handheld my camera all the time, even do it with a 7200 at times, if I really want kind of more freedom to move around in a true run and gun setup, because obviously carrying a monopod or a tripod is gonna be really tough around if you wanna be really mobile and truly run and gun. Somewhere where you're on kind of a wider lens is where you're gonna wanna handhold your camera a lot. If you try and handhold a 7200 for a whole baseball game, you might be able to, but you're gonna be really tired by the end. Your shot, might not be as steady as a guy or girl using the monopod. Things to think about, those are the 3 methods that I'm gonna talk about in this video, but let's get into individual sports. So let's talk about football first, and I'm referring to American football. I realize a lot of my viewers are American, and a lot of y'all in college or moving on to young videographers out of college, you all wanna shoot football, whether it's college football, the NFL. That's how I was when I was at Georgia. It was obviously the biggest sport at Georgia, so everyone wants to shoot it. We're gonna discuss it right now. There's multiple different ways to shoot football. I think in terms of variants of tools to use, football uses the most. I would say if you're watching this video, you're most likely a beginner, right? And you haven't shot much and you're looking to invest in a monopod or a tripod or your first camera gear and all that stuff. So I'm not gonna discuss like a hi-hat, which is what a lot of like really professional shooters will use in NFL films or in college football. They'll use the hi-hat, which is basically another form of a miniature tripod when you're on the ground, so you can get that low angle. And then there's also obviously shouldering your rig or camera, which you need a pretty nice and big camera to do. So I'm assuming if you're a beginner, you're not gonna be needing this type of information from this video, but those are two methods that I see people use in the NFL, on NFL sidelines. In the past when I freelanced, and then also of course in college, my bosses would use hi-hats with a 7200 lens on like a FX6 or a Red or anything like that, and then they would shoulder a camera as well to be able to track the football up and down and side to side. But for football, if you're just starting out, I would say get a monopod, just because it is gonna allow you that freedom of movement. There is gonna be a lot of stuff that goes up and down in football, whether it's like a long pass or a punt, or there's gonna be a lot of action that comes right at you as well. If you're in the corner of the end zone, you're gonna want kind of that added freedom. Another thing to consider when you're shooting football is they switch ends. So do you really wanna be lugging a full big tripod end to end if you're trying to stay on one side whenever they switch quarters, like if you want the offense coming at you? So for football, I would use a monopod. Now let's discuss basketball. If you are under the basket or on the court, whether it's the sideline or the baseline, you should probably just handheld your camera, just because if you're really close to the court, it's gonna require a lot of angling your body and moving at the torso. And a monopod is just gonna kind of restrict that movement. And whenever you are under the basket, the ball's gonna be moving really fast, right? So it's almost easier to go, like if you're on a 24-70 under the basket, if you're, let's say, zoomed into 35 millimeters or 50 millimeters, like you're gonna want to be able to kind of hold the zoom and snap it really fast and up, down to get the shot and all that, and a dunk, You're gonna really wanna be able to move your body side to side, up and down, especially if you're on a wide lens. It's not gonna really matter if you have a monopod or not. And I think a monopod or a tripod is just gonna, add some clunkiness to your movement. In addition to that though, if you are going to a basketball game and you're gonna mix up your angles, like say you're going up to the concourse or the upper deck or a bird's eye view, you're gonna want something to stabilize your camera. So definitely bring a monopod, but if you're on the court, don't use it. I don't really think it's ideal to use it. But when shooting basketball, I would say shoot handheld on the court and then bring a monopod with you if you wanna go up and mix up your angles and go up into the crowd. And then finally, baseball and softball. Baseball and softball is pretty simple. I think most of the time you're just gonna be using a monopod to shoot game action. It's really hard to follow the ball in these sports because it moves so fast and it's very small. So a monopod is gonna be your best bet there. You're gonna be on a longer lens. You're gonna be a lot further away, obviously for safety reasons. So anytime you're shooting game action, if I'm on a 70-200, even if I'm all the way zoomed out at 70, I'm always gonna be on a monopod when I'm shooting game action. Like I did say, whenever I'm shooting, guys coming out of the dugout, guys walking by, guys putting equipment on, if I'm in the dugout, I am handheld for the most part too, just to be a little bit more run and gun and mobile. But whenever you're shooting game action, you want a nice monopod, especially with feet if you're shooting video. I tell people this all the time, the difference between a good monopod for video and not is you need one with feet, because it's gonna just add that little bit of stability to your shots. Now, if you're a photographer, that's a totally different argument, totally different story. You don't really necessarily need feet because you're not gonna be panning constantly and stuff like that. So for baseball, game action, always gonna be a monopod. You can use a tripod if you are on a long lens like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, but for the most part, a monopod's probably your best bet. And finally, let's discuss soccer. Soccer is one that kind of also varies like football. If you're shooting like a professional game, there's gonna be ad boards. So shooting on a hi-hat is gonna be, it's there. You might be able to shoot in front of the ad boards, you might not be. When I was at DC United, we would shoulder cameras, and that would help out because the ball, when it bounces up and down, it was easy to track. But whenever you are shooting soccer, consider this, the pitch is massive. You're going to need some sort of stabilization. Most likely you're gonna be on a 200 or higher lens, unless you're really just focusing on action right in front of the goal. But for soccer, I would say you could use a tripod or a monopod. The reason being is that just, there is a lot of up and down movement and side to side in soccer as well. When the ball is bounced up or kicked long, and there's headers and stuff like that. So if the ball's in the middle of the pitch, you're gonna be really far away from that action. So if you feel more comfortable using a tripod, something that's a little bit more stable, I would definitely use that. You're not also going to be running up and down and switching every quarter like they do in football. When the offense switches which end zone it drives to, it's only gonna be halves. So I definitely think like soccer is up to you. You can get a monopod, you can get a tripod. Tripod's gonna give you a little bit more stability, I would say, at those longer lengths. If you have questions about other sports in particular, let me know in the comments below. If you do have any questions, my Instagram DMs are always open. I always try and reply to people. It might take me a few days or a week or two, but I'm always open for questions. I'm ultimately just trying to help y'all out. I appreciate y'all for watching. I hope I was able to provide some value in this discussion today. I'll see y'all in the next one.